Hey, right, this is the last in the current series of the brutally honest top 5 videos. It's time for me to move on to other things, but if you have any ideas or requests for further top 5 videos, let me know in the comments section down below. Now, on Wednesday's video, my original concept for that video was the top 5 practical and financial reasons for riding a motorcycle, but it sort of got sidelined by the AI and it sort of picked up more on the emotive reasons. So I did that video, but today we're going to look at why it makes perfect common sense, both practically and financially, to ride a motorcycle day to day, including going to work and doing the odd shopping trip. Now, I've covered some of these subjects in the past, and you usually get some pushback from people who are looking for reasons not to use a motorcycle. I'll try to deal with those common grapes as we go along, rather than list them all at the beginning. So let's get straight in with reason number 5, and we're going in descending order here. Convenience. I have a car like most people. I've also got a wonderful selection of motorcycles to choose from, but motorcycles are far more convenient than cars are, depending on what you want to do. But when it comes to going to work, my personal view is that they're pretty much unbeatable. Car parking is a major headache for workers. Your place of work might provide some parking spaces, but you usually find they're at a premium, so you have to look elsewhere because it's full when you get to work. And I know from comments on this channel in the past, a lot of people have to factor in an additional 10 to 15 minutes to find somewhere to park the car when they get to work. And that's before you take in the potential cost for using private car parks. I've had some people tell me that it costs them £50 a week just to park up at work. So bear that figure in mind, because this does come into play later on. You rarely have to pay to park a motorcycle anywhere in the UK. I know there are a few towns and cities where you do have to pay, but generally speaking you don't. You can park free. And most towns and cities do provide free dedicated motorcycle parking. Hull, where I live, is particularly good. I think we've got about 8 dedicated motorcycle parking bays. And in the public car parks there are again usually dedicated parking bays for motorcycles, which again are free. But the best bit is that, for most places of work, especially since the Cycle to Work scheme was brought in, they do have on-site parking for pedal cycles and motorcycles. A motorcycle is very small, it doesn't take up much space, and there's usually somewhere where you can safely park it at your place of work, saving you a lot of time and hassle in your morning routine getting to work. One excuse I often hear for not using a motorcycle to get to work is theft. And usually when you dissect these comments, you find that it's people that live down there in that London or other similar cities. Yeah, granted, I accept there are some areas where crime rates are very high and using a motorcycle isn't a good idea because you're going to get it stolen. My view on this personally is, that is down to the choice of where you work and where you live. Not everywhere is the same, so that problem doesn't apply to everyone. Reason number 4, speed. Generally speaking, it's a lot faster getting to work or going to the shops or whatever, especially if you live in built-up areas on a motorcycle. And I don't mean travelling at illegal speeds to get there. I just mean motorcycles are more agile. They have a huge advantage over cars when it comes to moving into traffic. I don't advocate overtaking everything, but there are times when you can make headway faster than a queue of traffic by overtaking stationary vehicles, as long as it's safe to do so. Also, some towns and cities, like the city that I live in, motorcycles are allowed to use bus lanes. So you're able to get to work much quicker without sweating it. I know in the past I've sort of done a mixture of commuting by car and by motorcycle to the same destination, and I would easily save between 10 and 20 minutes a day on the bike compared to the car. So, you know, when you add that to the problems with parking when you get to your destination, you could easily cut off 20 to 30 minutes from your daily travelling time both ways, which means, you know, you're potentially saving up to an hour a day just getting to and from work. That's got to be worth something. And that time saved can really reduce your stress levels. You know, I remember in days gone by when, as I say, I used to use a mixture of car and motorcycle to get to work. The stress that would build up on particularly bad traffic days where, you know, even though you'd set off 40 minutes early to travel just 6 miles to work, you knew you were going to end up being late because there was some hold up somewhere that was causing traffic jams. And I remember my stress levels used to go through the roof because I knew I was going to be late for work, even though I'd done everything I possibly could to ensure I'd be there on time. That sort of scenario rarely presents itself when you're commuting to work on a motorcycle. Now, before we get on to number 3, can I ask you please, if you're enjoying this video and you're finding it useful, please leave a like, hype this video if the hype button is available to you, and consider becoming a subscriber if you're not already a subscriber. Right, number 3. People often see cost as a barrier to take up motorcycling, even for a small motorcycle. The thing is, like I said earlier on, some people are telling me that they're paying up to £50 a week just to park the car. That's £200 a month. Now, there are plenty of motorcycles on the market, sort of 350cc's and below, that are available new for a very reasonable price with some very attractive financing deals available. I mean, at the moment there are a lot of 0% financing deals going around. I noticed that with Royal Enfield this week, they announced that. Often with a small deposit, and I'm talking around about £100, maybe £250, and less than £100 a month, you can get onto 2 wheels and you've got transport to get you to work. Add on to that your insurance, about an extra £20 a month, and for around about £120, £130 a month, you've got a fresh set of 2 wheels that can get you to work and provide you with those advantages that I've already mentioned. That is actually a saving on your current budget. You know, if you're driving a car to work, you know, we'll put petrol to one side for the moment, but if you're driving a car to work, parking alone, a lot of people, as I've said, are telling me it's costing them £50 a week to park up in private car parks when they get to work. Let's say it's half of that. Just by leaving your car at home, you're already providing the finances to pay for that bike. And let's face it, you don't need to get a new bike. As we've already discussed, there are plenty of almost new, very low mileage garage queens on the market with substantial discounts over new, and you can still probably get very good finance deals on them for even less money per month. So just the act of leaving your car at home and using a new bike instead is potentially going to finance that new bike for you. And don't forget, once you've got that bike, you don't just have to use it for work. You'll soon find that you're using it for daily chores, you know, going to the shops, etc., and for pleasure as well. So, you know, the value of having that bike extends that even further. Reason number 2. Contrary to what is commonly believed, you don't have to spend loads of money dressing like a twat in order to ride a motorcycle. Nor do you need a big, powerful, expensive motorcycle, and I'm just throwing this one in because I can. Hy-Vis Power Ranger style clothing, it doesn't make you that much more visible on the road than wearing other types of clothing. I remember reading an article a few years ago now, it must be 14 or 15 years ago, the Department for Transport had done some tests on the visibility of motorcycle clothing, and they concluded in the end that high-vis motorcycle clothing is no more noticeable to other road users than black clothing. The reason being that high-vis has been so overused that the human brain tends to immediately disregard it whenever it sees it. And if you don't have the budget, you don't need to buy an expensive leather jacket. Now, these things are nice to have if you can afford them. But, I mean, you don't have to buy new. You can always go for second hand. You know, a quick look on eBay or various other websites. There's plenty of reasonably priced motorcycle clothing available, a lot of which has barely been used. And there are perfectly safe helmets at the budget end of the market that are easy to get hold of. What I'm trying to say is you can ride around on a motorcycle and still look like a normal human being when you reach your destination. I mean, one example that always springs to mind with me, there's a guy, he's been riding bikes past my house going to work for about a decade now. I often, we cross paths when I'm walking Willow, my dog. I first sort of noticed this guy about 10 years ago on Triumph T120. Really cool guy. I don't know how old he is because his face is always covered up, but he has what I think is an old Belstaff Roadmaster jacket, wax cotton jacket, which, I mean, that must be at least 10 years old because I don't think they've made them in that space of time. A black half-face helmet, a pair of goggles, and, over the years I've watched him change bikes. He used to have a van about 5 years ago, and more recently is riding to work on a Honda Monkey 125. But this guy just looks so cool. Probably even more so now, to my mind, that he's riding that little black monkey. He's got to be the coolest guy. I don't know where he works, but he's got to be the coolest guy at work. I always admire the way he dressed, because although he does sort of dress like a motorcyclist, he dresses in a classic manner. And, the kind of stuff that he's wearing now, you can get very reasonably on places like eBay. You don't have to have brand spanking new gear. In fact, when it comes to wax cotton, it probably looks even better when it's about a decade old or more. And if you really must wear PPE for riding a motorcycle, the certifications may have changed in the way they're presented to you, but the safety levels are still the same as they were 10 or 15 years ago. So you're not taking any risks by buying second-hand clothing, as long, of course, as it's in decent condition. And quite often, some of the stuff that I've seen, it looks like it's barely been worn. And you don't have to go for second-hand gear. There are plenty of brands now that emulates, clothing like Belstaff and Barber that are very reasonable priced. And, this is the kind of gear that people wear casually now that don't even own motorcycles. So you don't look out of place. You're not going to look out of place turning up at your place of work or even going out on a little shopping expedition. If you put a bit of thought into it, you don't have to compromise the way you look in order to ride a motorcycle. And finally, we're down to number one. And this is probably the most important one. Finances. It's a lot cheaper to use a motorcycle than it is to drive around in a car. Just look at the situation at the moment with fuel. The prices have gone through the roof. Motorcycles, especially small motorcycles, sip fuel. Unleaded petrol at the moment is something like £1.49 per litre. In some areas it's even more. Your average family car, driven carefully, will give you somewhere between 40 miles to the gallon, and if you're lucky, maybe 50 miles to the gallon. Your average 350 I'll do 100 miles to the gallon. I was quite surprised last Saturday when I was riding the GB350, despite doing quite a bit of high-speed motorway work on it, it was returning 111 miles to the gallon. Some 125s will give you 150 miles to the gallon, and small 50cc motorcycles can potentially provide you with even more travel per gallon of fuel. And this is the really important bit. They're so cheap to run that, you know, with the money that you're saving by not using your car, you know, you've probably used half of your budget buying the bike, but you're still going to have quite a bit of money left over. And you're saving a lot of money on fuel. Now, it's okay if you've already got a full bike license, you know, you don't have to worry about this side of it. But what a lot of people throw at me in the comments on these sort of videos is how expensive it is to get through your motorcycle test and get a full license. Thankfully, it's not something I have to worry about because, you know, I passed my test back in 1984, I think it was. But I realise it is quite an expensive endeavour. I mean, people have told me it can cost anything from £1,000 to £1,500 to get through your test. But you've got 2 years to do that. And with the savings that you've made by swapping to a small motorcycle, you've already financed not just the purchase and the insurance and the tax on the motorcycle, but also getting yourself through your test. Now, if you passed your test before 2001 for your car, you can ride a 50cc moped without L plates pretty much permanently. And you're also riding the most economic class of motorcycle. Do that for a year and you will have financed, you know, getting through your CBT and getting a full license. Alright, it requires some dedication and time. It all depends how serious you are about it. Nothing's free, you know, nothing comes easy in life. But what I'm trying to say here is it doesn't need to stretch your budget any further than it already is with you just using your car to get to work. You know, there are so many advantages on top of that. You know, lack of stress, saving time, you know, ease of parking, free parking. You're saving so much money and hassle that this is effectively going to finance itself if you're careful about how you go about it. Getting through your motorcycle test doesn't have to be an additional cost on top of everything else. Yeah, you're maybe not going to make any savings for the first year or two, but after that you definitely will. If you're sensible about how you go about it, it can be a self-financing endeavour. Right, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. Don't forget, leave a like, hype this video and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. I will of course be back next week, so until then, please ride safely.